Welcome to a journey through time, returning to the year 410 AD to witness the collapse of a symbol once believed to be eternal: Rome. Rome, for centuries, what we know about Rome in the year 410 AD has been recorded through drawings, fragmentary lines in historical chronicles, and the testimonies of those who witnessed a world in collapse. Those images show smoke rising from temple rooftops, stone-paved streets left empty, and a city that once dominated the Mediterranean, suddenly falling into silence. But drawings do not move. Writing does not allow us to hear sound, and human imagination has its limits. In this video, we use artificial intelligence trained on historical records, ancient art, and archaeological evidence to reconstruct Rome in 410 AD, not as a myth, but as a real city, with real people and a real moment. In the next 10 minutes, you will witness the moment when the eternal city fractured for the first time. For more than 8 centuries, Rome was not merely a populous city, it was the coordinating center of the entire Western world. From stone-paved roads stretching thousands of kilometers, to laws that shaped how people lived and governed, to legions marching from the deserts of Africa to the northern mists, everything was designed to lead back to Rome. The power of this city did not lie solely in soldiers or weapons, but in systems, a machinery capable of collecting taxes, issuing laws, mobilizing armies, and maintaining order across a space larger than anything the world had known. For the Romans, Rome was not a choice. It was the anchor of the world's order. Generations were born, lived, and died within a reality in which Rome always existed at the center. Thus, belief in the eternity of Rome did not come from arrogance, but from historical habit. They did not believe Rome would never face crisis. They simply could not imagine a world without Rome. As the 5th century began, the Roman Empire still existed on maps and in official documents, but reality had shifted profoundly. Power was no longer concentrated in Rome. The emperor rarely resided in the city. Major decisions were made in new centers, especially in the east, where economic and military strength still endured. The Roman treasury was gradually depleted after decades of continuous warfare. Tax revenues declined, while the costs of defense grew ever higher. The army, once the backbone of the empire, was fragmented to confront threats along endlessly stretched frontiers. Rome still stood as a monumental symbol, with grand structures and memories of glory, but the city no longer controlled the empire's fate. It had become a historical shell while real power had drifted elsewhere. Outside the formidable walls of Rome stood Alaric, leader of the Visigoths. He was not a foreign invader from the edge of the world. Alaric had served in the Roman army, had fought under Roman banners, and understood Rome's system from within. He knew how Rome functioned, he knew its strengths, and he knew the weaknesses the Romans themselves refused to acknowledge. Alaric's demands were not aimed at destroying the city. He demanded money to pay his troops, land for settlement, and above all, official recognition from an empire that had promised much and withdrawn it all. Rome chose negotiation. Rome chose delay. Rome believed that, as many times before, this threat would eventually fade away. In August of the year 410 AD, what had long been considered impossible occurred. The gates of Rome were not breached by siege engines, nor did they collapse after a violent battle. They were opened from within in silence and desperation. There were no legendary lines of defenders holding the walls. There was no heroic moment of salvation. The remaining defensive forces were too few, too exhausted, and too disorganized to mount effective resistance. The city that once inspired fear across the world was now incapable of defending itself. Resistance collapsed almost immediately, not because Rome became weaker in a single day, but because the system that protected it had been failing for decades. In that moment, Rome confronted a harsh truth. Authority does not disappear with explosions, but with silence, when no one remains to defend it. For 3 consecutive days, Rome was plundered. Not as a distant city, but as the heart of a collapsing world. Palaces were ransacked, treasuries were emptied, temples once considered inviolable were entered and stripped of wealth accumulated over generations. The symbols of imperial power became hollow within just a few short days. This was the first time in nearly 8 centuries that Rome fell to a foreign force, not because its walls were insufficient, but because there was no longer real power left to defend them. News spread rapidly across the Mediterranean. From Gaul to North Africa, from Spain to Asia Minor, people repeated the same question. If Rome could be plundered, what then was truly safe? Rome did not disappear after the days of plunder. The walls still stood. The stone-paved roads were still there, and people continued to live among the familiar ruins. But what truly collapsed was not architecture or population. What was shattered was the deep belief in Rome's inviolability. For centuries, the order of the Western world had been built on the assumption that Rome would always exist, that its power was the ultimate anchor. When Rome was defeated, that assumption collapsed as well. If the center of order could fall, then no system was truly secure. From that moment on, a sense of unease spread throughout the former Roman world, not because Rome had lost all its power, but because the belief that had held the empire together no longer existed. After 410, the Western world no longer functioned around a single center. Power, once drawn toward Rome, was now fragmented into scattered pieces. Trade routes changed direction, no longer protected by a unified system. Cities that had once depended on Rome were forced to manage on their own, to defend themselves and to adapt independently. Politically, there was no longer a supreme authority, capable of imposing law across a vast space as before. Local lords, small kingdoms, and emerging powers gradually filled the vacuum. The Western world entered a prolonged transitional period in which the old order had collapsed, but the new order had not yet fully formed. With no single guiding center, history began to move in multiple directions, opening an era that was fragmented, unstable, yet also full of transformation. Rome did not vanish from the historical map after 410. But the city was no longer Rome as it once had been. Its very nature had changed. Pagan temples that had once been the center of public life were gradually replaced by Christian churches. The Senate, symbol of ancient political authority, lost its practical role in governing society. Within that vacuum of power, the church emerged as the only institution with sufficient organization and continuity to maintain order, care for communities, and preserve the memory of the old world. Rome no longer commanded armies or collected taxes for the empire, but it began to assume a different, more enduring role. From the capital of earthly power, Rome transformed into the spiritual center of Europe, shaping belief and thought for centuries to come. Immediately after the events of 410, the Roman world was not only shaken, but also plunged into a profound debate over the true causes of the collapse. Many believed that Rome had brought its fate upon itself. They argued that the city had fallen into moral decay, losing the values that had once given strength to its ancestors. In this view, the collapse did not come from external enemies, but from internal rot. Others took a more pragmatic perspective. They blamed weak politics, poor military decisions, and an administrative system too cumbersome to defend itself. But some intellectuals of the time went further still. They reached a cold and difficult conclusion: no earthly city is eternal. Rome was no exception. It was simply the clearest proof of that rule. After 410, the Western Roman Empire continued to exist for more than half a century. Emperors were still proclaimed, laws were still issued, provinces still formally belonged to Rome on paper, but in reality the empire had lost the ability to save itself. The machinery that had once governed an entire world no longer possessed the resources needed to sustain long-term order. The army lacked manpower and funding. Taxes could no longer be collected as before. Local regions grew increasingly autonomous, and the central authority could no longer impose power effectively. After the shock of 410, all illusions of full recovery dissolved. There were no longer systemic solutions, only temporary, improvised efforts remained, delaying an outcome that had already been determined. The fall of the Western Roman Empire was no longer a question of if, but only of when. Rome did not collapse in a single instant. It fractured gradually over time, adapted in weakness, and ultimately transformed into something else. The Eternal City continued to exist after 410, with its people, its memories, and its surviving structures. But the ancient world over which Rome once stood, at the center, was gone. From that shock, the old order disintegrated. Power fragmented. New forms of organization slowly emerged. Europe entered a different era, no longer guided by a single empire, but shaped through multiple centers and parallel historical paths. The year 410 AD did not end Rome, but it ended the world that Rome had once ruled.